Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics. And Boris Johnson also likes to rewrite the rules of politics. But in this video, I'd like to consider whether this may cause him to end up realising that political realities are stronger than blind Etonian bluff, or is he in fact a little bit wiser than we sometimes give him credit for? So first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So although Boris Johnson has had his political naivety exposed in the years leading up to his path to number 10, once he finally made it inside, he's had it fairly easy. He was able to abandon the centre ground in order to head off the threat from the Brexit party, something that under normal circumstances would have been political suicide, but he was still able to win a general election handsomely. He got his new majority to almost tear up his own withdrawal bill and completely reshape it in direct contradiction to his own manifesto promises. Without so much as a murmur from his backbenchers, he's also been able to dominate his own cabinet by appointing vacuous shells of human beings who will do whatever they are told and engage in any amount of doublespeak for political power. He's also set Dominic Cummings, his chief strategist, on the task of bringing the civil service under his control. He wants all the levers of power installed in number 10 so that we move away from a parliamentary democracy and more into, well, frankly, a dictatorship. And to that end, he's also made moves to reduce the amount of time that Parliament is sitting. He's even taken advantage of the current pandemic to put forward the idea that maybe Parliament shouldn't be sitting right now, or that at least it should be ready to stop doing so if things get a little worse, something that is definitely on the cards with his deliberate mishandling of affairs. And with a canny political operator, these moves could be very worrying indeed. But is Johnson or his team actually politically astute, or is this just all that old Etonian belief that confidence is all you need to achieve anything? You just have to believe. Take, for example, his defence of his Home Secretary Priti Patel. Now, with the political storm surrounding her and increasing in intensity, until very recently, there is no way she'd still be in post now. No previous Prime Minister ever would have kept her in that position. She'd have been encouraged to resign. The usual procedure in this situation is get them to write a letter of resignation saying that although they've done nothing wrong, they don't want the bad press to affect the important work of government to distract from the important work. And in one fell swoop, you remove the problem, and also the pressure to hold genuine investigations abates as well, so they can get to carry on saying that they did nothing wrong and be brought back in when the storm has blown over, so to speak. But Johnson has not done this. Against all political wisdom, he's sticking with Priti Patel, although he was very defensive about answering the question as to when he first found out about allegations against her. And there's a reason why other prime ministers would not have stuck by a minister attracting such damaging headlines. It is not because all previous prime ministers were basically decent people who would have been genuinely shocked at the revelations and only wanted ministers of very good character in their cabinet. No. It's because they understood the damage that defending, or at least downplaying such behaviour, would have on the credibility of their entire government. You remove the rotten apple before it spoils the barrel. Johnson plays by different rules though. He doesn't believe that political wisdom, which has held firm for thousands of years, applies to him. The problem that he has is that he also wants to push ahead with a quite staggeringly ambitious series of reforms, any one of which would take a whole parliament and even then may not see fruition. It's not like he has a single focus though. It's not like he has one thing he really wants to do. Consider what tasks he's set his government. So first of all, he wants to regenerate the economy in the north of England. He wants to retain the seats that he won there at the end of last year. Now, that is laudable, but it's no easy task for any government. If it had no other reforms to prioritise, that would still be a significant challenge. 2, he wants to drive a green revolution in the country. He doesn't quite know why. He's been quite open about the fact that he doesn't understand environmental issues, but he knows they're important. This is another set of reforms that would be challenging enough if there were no other urgent tasks in the in-tray for government. 3, he wants to abolish the independent judiciary, a huge constitutional reform that will be challenged every step of the way. 4, he wants to limit the power of Parliament and even his own ministers, something else that requires a lot of very careful political manoeuvring that will not be helped by being distracted with lots of other foci. 5, He wants to be seen to be cutting taxes. Doesn't necessarily have to cut taxes, but he wants to be seen to be cutting taxes. Something that only really works if your spending plans are modest and you have a very buoyant economy. But he is planning a spending spree, the likes of which Conservatives never engage in, and the economy is stagnant. 6, he wants to completely reshape the civil service. Now, although I don't agree with how he wants to reshape it, I do agree that reforms are certainly needed. However, the process of reshaping any team has the effect of making it less effective and efficient whilst you are doing it. You hope for gains at the end of the process, but while it's happening, it's going to be chaos. So the notion of re-engineering the entire civil service, whilst you also have so many other plates spinning, which remember, need to be enacted by that same civil service, seems a sort of madness to me. And yet he wants to do all of these things within a few years. Any one of which would keep a government busy for years to come against the backdrop of major environmental and health emergencies, and we're only a couple of months into the year, as well as a self-inflicted emergency coming at the end of the year in the form of his form of Brexit. It all seems quite impossible, and it's easy to think that Boris Johnson is making every wrong move possible. It's almost like there's a book on how a politician should react in every given situation, and Boris Johnson is doing the opposite. So Boris Johnson is refusing to accept political wisdom. He's a fool who is going to fall badly. He's trying to do so much that he'll end up doing nothing. An idiot who sits at his desk making policies and then think that, well, because his work is done, he now needs to move on to the next policy, without realising that it might take 10 seconds to come up with a policy, but several years to actually implement it. And that outcome would not be disappointing to me. The idea that he will not achieve any of his aims actually has a certain comfort to it. But it may not be quite that simple. I mean, I wish it were. The problem is that keeps rattling around in my head is that when Boris Johnson first became Prime Minister, his very first action was to get his party to use Facebook, other forms of social media, particularly Facebook, to find out what were people's hot button issues. That's what he wanted to know. He didn't arrogantly assume that he knew what people wanted and act on it, as other political leaders have done. He knew he didn't know and he wanted to find out. Okay, it wasn't so that he could actually do what people wanted. The information was to be used to manipulate, not empower the public. But he understood that he needed that information and that he didn't currently have it, or he didn't at the time. He asked for that information to be gathered, and when it came, he paid attention to it and acted upon it. He didn't ignore what he didn't like. He took it on board and adjusted his strategy accordingly. Hit those hot button issues that, of course, led to his electoral success. In other words, he demonstrated a wisdom which is not only totally at odds with his other behaviours as Prime Minister, but also impressive when compared to political leaders who should be opposing and should have been opposing Boris Johnson last year. Domestically, that is. I still think it's impossible for him to achieve everything he wants. And there is a danger that he's, danger to him, not to me, that he's going to come unstuck with his refusal to follow political rules. But at the same time, those actions mean he's not a complete fool. He pays attention to facts. He doesn't ignore them. Publicly he may do, but privately he doesn't ignore them. And that's why I think it's important to look at his statements and actions, not with an eye to highlighting the weakness in them and saying, oh, he can never get it done, this is fantastic if you're his opponent, but also looking for any cunning within them. So anyway, those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. I hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, then please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.